Hello, and welcome to Cambridge Libraries Around the World podcast. I'm Hadindur from the library marketing team here at Cambridge University Press. Joining me on today's episode on Open Access Publishing is Professor Frederick Ato-Armah, Professor of Environmental and Sustainability Science at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana, and Andri Johnston, who's the Digital and Open Access Projects Editor here at Cambridge University Press. Welcome, Frederick and Andri.
Hi, Hadi. It's great to be here.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you. So earlier this month, we celebrated International Open Access Week, which is designed to help researchers learn about open access and share ideas about how open access can work in libraries and higher education. Today, we will hear from Professor Armah about his efforts to improve open access in Ghana and the African continent at large. And Andri will be telling us all about open access books and some of the projects she's been working on at Cambridge to make our publishing more inclusive. So, Professor Armah, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us, could you define open access for us, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know quite what it is?
Thanks, Hadi, for this question. Open access is a mechanism that ensures that research literature is freely available on the public internet and permits any users to read, to download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link to the full text of articles, or even crawl them for indexing, pass them as data to software, or use them for any other lawful purpose. And here it is without financial, legal, or technical barriers other than those that are inseparable from gaining access to the internet itself. This means that open access literature, research articles, review articles, book chapters, and many others may be available online, but certain constituencies may not have access owing to limitations of internet access. But generally, we find that open access is a kind of access, not a kind of business model, license, or content. And here we also talk about 4 key attributes or dimensions of open access. The first is that there's no barrier to access for the reader. So the reader has unfettered access to the literature. It is also free to the authors. Copyright is retained by the authors, and then the paper or the article can be freely distributed under license.
Thank you, Frederick, for such an elaborate answer. Andri, I'm going to come to you now and ask you to come in from a Cambridge perspective. Tell us why the open access model was created and the books, and where did this need come from?
Yeah, sure, Hadi. Well, I think open access in itself started quite a while ago, and as Professor Frederick alluded to, it started in journals mostly around research articles, and books kind of followed out of that. And I guess you could say the need came from making as much research and publicly funded research openly available to as many researchers and readers as possible. So really it came out of that. The open access books movement, I think, started taking off around the end of the 2000s, early 2010s. And since then, a couple of innovations in Europe especially have really taken flight, like Open and some other initiatives that specifically work towards making more book content openly available. However, open access books is not as developed or as far along as journal open access is. So we still have quite a bit of work to do to find a way to do it sustainably for publishers, but also make sure that we're making the content available to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Andri. And Andri, just coming back to you again, what are some of the key moves that Cambridge is making in this field?
So I think for Cambridge, open access publishing across the board is very important. It is part of being a university press, and open access publishing is becoming more important to us as a publisher. It's part of what we are. It's part of our fiber, you could almost say. We have our traditional, what would be considered traditional open access book policies, gold, green open access book policies, and traditional BPCs or book processing charges. But we're also doing a lot of experimentation on the book side, and I'm happy to expand on those a little bit as we go along in this conversation. And I think that's what's the exciting part about the books open access field at Cambridge.
Thank you, Andri. Yes, I know you're working on quite a few projects, and then you're working on a books open access project as well. So we'll talk about that as the conversation goes on. So Frederick, part of the reason this, initiative has come about is to provide an international perspective in publishing and also open the door to collaboration from all parts of the world. You've briefly already mentioned, open access meaning having no barrier to access for the readers. Tell us more about that, Frederick.
Thank you, Hadi. This is quite interesting. When tackling large research questions, collaboration among researchers is essential, and this collaboration has been highly dependent on the publishing industry. Embedded in the notion of international is the element of heterogeneity or context-specific differences that manifest in various geographical domains. Different parts of the world have different circumstances. For instance, funding schemes, scientific research capabilities, limits to access, and publishing capabilities, and many others. This notwithstanding, there are certain attributes that are cross-cutting. And perhaps we need to situate this discussion within the context of the research and innovation ecosystem in most parts of the world. With reference to the quintuple helix, we have academia as one of the nodes. And here we are talking about researchers nested in their institutions. They could be working in universities or research institutions. And then the next node, we have funders who could be either private or public. We have governments, the general public, and civil society, including NGOs. So these groups make up the 5 nodes that we refer to as the quintuple helix innovation ecosystem. Each of these stakeholders have expectations of scholarly research outputs in terms of the benefits that must accrue to each stakeholder group and society as a whole. If we were to take, for instance, researchers are aiming for greater visibility and reach, and open access provides a veritable platform for this to be achieved. Researchers are interested in increased efficiency. They're interested in sourcing for funds and grants. They are also interested in collaboration and network. And all of these benefits that are likely to accrue to them can be engineered through open access. When we take funders, they also have a different set of expectations. They are looking at increased visibility and reuse of funded research. They are looking at greater funding impact, and they are looking at greater return on their investments. And open access provides them the vehicle for them to achieve a number of these benefits. The general public is also looking for faster knowledge transfer. In the past, we had to wait for so many months or years in order for us to have access to the knowledge that has been churned out through scientific research. This is no longer the case. The general public is interested in increased understanding and expertise, and they are also interested in promoting engagement in research and science. If we were to take, for instance, civil society or NGOs for that matter, they are interested in enhanced access to research, more effective advocacy, and lobbying. And then even when we take, for instance, the last ambit, which is government, government is interested in evidence-informed policy and promoting human rights and democracy. So in a sense, open access is instrumental because it is a means to an end, as it offers all of these opportunities, these end goals and expectations. The rise of open access movement on a global scale is partly attributable to these prospects.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frederick. And Andri, just on that point about opening the doors to collaboration and the benefits, would you like to add anything to it?
I mean, I think that what Frederick said is essential and is so important, such an important part of why we need to publish more books, open access, because, like he said, the general public is more interested in research today, and we need to make that more accessible. But also, it's important for us to share as much research as we can. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that we need to put the right peer-reviewed research out there so people are informed. I also think open access publishing can and should be encouraging more the sharing of research across the world, not just from Europe and North America, where most of the big publishers are based. It should open a door to us, everyone being able to share their research more widely. So I think, yes, it is a very important tool that we need to utilize to make a research more widely available across the globe to all researchers.
Thank you again, Andri. And I'm interested to know, have you seen any sort of trend in the kind of publications that are made open access?
It's a very good question because open access publishing is very much enabled through funding because and through funders. So the subject matter that has more funding available, which is usually your sciences, your STM subjects, those books and journals usually get the most funding. Also, just certain regions have more funding available. For example, in South America, open access publishing is very much part of the fiber of their whole academic publishing world and research world, because almost all research is publicly funded. So it differs. But I think one really important thing is that we need to find a way to break away from funding dictating what books are made open access. And that's one of the reasons for our Flip It Open book pilot. We specifically looked at adding titles to this pilot that are not traditionally funded STM subjects or titles. So we need to find a way to make those books that and also authors from regions that don't get a lot of funding also open access as well.
Thanks, Andri. And Frederick, Andri's, made a very important point about South America and, open access being kind of, central to their academic publishing. And just on that point about funding, I just wanted you to expand, Frederick, please, if you will, on what the situation is like in Ghana and the rest of the continent, if you could.
Yeah, thank you very much, Heidi, for this question. Funding is a very enduring question for us because we are in the developing world. The little funds that we have as researchers, it needs to go into the actual research. And therefore, when it comes to paying for let's say, article processing charges that one has to pay, this is quite problematic, especially if that individual is a young academic. In our part of the world, it is difficult for any young academic to say, I'm using 3 or 4 months of my salary to pay for one article to be published. So this is a huge issue for those working on the continent. And I believe that institutions have begun to partner with other organizations that are making article processing charges a thing of the past for them, or waiving part of the article processing charges. And I believe the funders are also coming into the fray strongly. They require that if they are funding any kind of project, they have to pay for the article to be published. Therefore, the burden is no longer on the researcher to pay. But it's a huge gap, because sometimes you want your work to end up in the highest impact journals, but you cannot get there because of constraints of article processing charges. And this is huge. We are gradually shifting to an era where this is being addressed, but it's not as fast as we would have wanted.
Thanks, Frederick. So if I'm a young academic in, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and I want my work to be published openly, where do I begin?
So of course, if the person is a researcher in an institution, let's say, for instance, a university in Ghana, then we have the legal and policy framework governing publications. So usually they have the grants and research office, where they give advice to young academics which journals are available to publish good open access, which funders make funding available for researchers to gain access to the high impact factor journals. You have a plethora of information that the researcher can have. And then, of course, because we are also in the developing world, there are a number of mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that we are not unduly disadvantaged to a great extent. So you have Research for Life, and you have other Agora and other initiatives that have been Hinari, that have been initiated in the past to ensure that those working in low-income countries can also have access to the highest quality content and can also have their work ending up in those outlets.
Thank you. It's good to know that there's a number of initiatives available and support is there. Andri, I'm going to come to you again to tell us more about the decision-making process. How do we decide what books or journals make it to open access or not?
So as a publisher, we don't make that decision. It is very much the author's decision and the funder decision, but also policy. As Frederick mentioned, a lot of new policies that are coming in, things like Plan S, on the book side, UKRI, which is a UK funder, books funding body. They dictate what titles need to be open access and in what way. As a publisher, we would never show away an author who wants to do open access. But what does factor into that kind of whole process is obviously we need to, from a publisher's side, do it in a sustainable way. We still have overheads, and that is why there are things like book processing fees or article processing fees. These are not ideal, but as publishers, we're trying to find a way to have that balance between, hosting the articles online and having our overheads, but still making them open access and available to the public. So the decision doesn't lie with us as publishers, but it is our responsibility to find sustainable ways of assisting and supporting authors in publishing open.
Thanks, Andri. I'm asking this next question for myself, really, because when I joined the press, one thing I kept hearing about is green and gold open access. And I still can't differentiate between the two. So, Andri, can you please tell us what they are and, what the difference is between the two of them, and if, one is perhaps more effective for authors and researchers than the other?
Yeah, sure. It even confuses me to this day sometimes as well.
Good to know.
It's and I can only imagine how it confuses authors as well. So yes, it is a tricky part, but basically, a green open access policy helps authors to comply with funder requirements that usually say that a section of their book or a pre-published version of their book or article needs to be made available online through a repository. So that's gold. That's the green open access. Gold open access is where the post edited and final manuscript is made open access at the press on the Cambridge Core site in its complete format. So where green doesn't necessarily, from a press perspective, sit on the Cambridge Core site, gold sits on the Cambridge Core site. It forms part of all of our site and all of the access that all the libraries have to our systems. So from an author's perspective, and I'd be very interested to hear what Frederick says as well on this, but from author's perspective, gold is the ultimate that we want to be able to provide, but it depends on, the funding that's available as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Andrew, for explaining it so well. Frederick, do you have anything to add to that? Are these models available in Ghana, and is there a preference among authors?
Yeah, thank you very much, Hadi, for this question. So, as Andrea really said, the green open access refers to the self-archiving in repositories. It could be an institutional repository or any other repository for that matter. So there are three basic versions that can be archived via the green open access route. You have the preprint, that is before peer review. You have the postprint, that is after peer review. And these two are actually author versions of the paper. And then the third one, which can also be archived, is the publisher's version. Yes, but then the drawback is that the article may not be immediately available due to an embargo by the publisher. So it is free. It is also a cost-effective solution. However, we find that there are a number of complexities pertaining to the green route. For instance, when, where, what version can be made open access. These are enduring questions for authors. And that is why some authors ignore green open access, although it may be effective. The gold also appears to be the ideal because there it's freely accessible and articles are made immediately available with reuse rights. But then it is the article processing charges that sometimes become a constraint. But we must also understand that gold open access does not necessarily mean that it is synonymous with article processing charges. It is not all gold open access through that charge open access fees. Sometimes they have other models that ensure that even though it's gold open access, you are not bearing the cost for publishing the work.
Thank you, Frederick. Andri, I'm going to come to you again. You mentioned at the start, about open access and the initiative starting in the early 2000s. I know that Cambridge is dedicated to providing this model and type of access. So with that in mind, what is the goal for Cambridge and how far have we come, or would you say we've come in terms of achieving it?
Well, I think we need to look at it at open access from two perspectives. there's a journals model, and I think we've come a lot further on the journal side. We have read and publish deals, and I know there's an aim to basically have all of our journal articles at some point part of these read and publish deals that basically make them gold open access. And these deals are what Frederick was referred to, and other publishers have similar ones. On the book side, like I mentioned before, we're very much still in the experimentation side of it. We want to find a model that is sustainable, but we also know that it won't necessarily apply to all of our books. We're not 100% sure. Will it apply to higher education books? Will it only apply to monographs? So I think we're very much still in the experimentation side of the book side, which is very, very interesting and exciting. And this is across the whole of academic book publishing. Nobody really has a set, we want to make every single book open or how we're going to do that. Journals is very much led by mandates, and books is not yet. And we still have that room to find ways to, like I've been saying, sustainably transition to a more open access publishing model across books. So slightly vague, but I think it's the experimentation part that's currently our goal in books, open access publishing.
Thanks, Andri. It's interesting to hear kind of the differences between, the two, and how far we've come in books, but also in journals. And I think this brings us nicely when we talk about open access books to a Cambridge project you're working on called Flip It Open. I would like you, Andri, please, if you will, to talk to us about Flip It Open. And then, Frederick, you can come in and tell us your thoughts on the initiative.
Yeah, sure. I am very excited about this pilot. We started it. We launched it in June this year. It's called Flip It Open because the whole initiative is that we have 28 books as part of the pilot, monograph titles. Some of them are collection works, and we are flipping them from traditionally published books. So they're publishing through our normal traditional publishing model. And once they reach a certain threshold in sales, we are flipping them to be open access to everyone. And we're kind of using a bit of a crowdfunding kind of model here, working with libraries to say, help us get these books to be open access. Help us flip these books to be open access. We've set ourselves kind of a timeline for the pilot. We're working on this until about May 2023. And then we'll evaluate it and we'll see whether we've reached this target, how long it takes us to reach it. But the exciting thing about this pilot is that once we flip the titles to be open access, we also immediately release a paperback version. All of these titles currently are available in digital format, but also in hardback and in third-party ebook format. And that's the versions that libraries are currently buying access to. But once they've flipped to open, we will have them available gold open access on the Cambridge core site. And we will also have a new paperback version where we talk about the pilot. But we're usually, with monographs, paperbacks are only available about 18 months post-publication. With this pilot, we're hoping to launch those paperbacks sooner. So for even for print readers who might want that title in print, they'll also be able to get it sooner as well. I think the important thing about this pilot is that we didn't choose STM titles. We chose titles from the humanities and sciences, and we looked at titles that traditionally would have high usage because they're very important topics, but they might not get funding that much because at the end of the day, aren't the titles that the people want the most the ones that should be open and freely available. So that's what we're trying to do with this pilot. And obviously there's a lot of things that we need to consider around it, but we're trialing it, and hopefully we'll be able to expand on this making it not just a pilot, but an actual publishing program, and making open access book publishing more accessible to more authors.
Thanks, Andri. I agree with you. I think it's really exciting, and I particularly love the community and collaboration aspect of it. Frederick, what do you make of Flip It Open and the focus also on humanities instead of SCM titles, which you kind of said in the beginning is an issue?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hadi. And I'm also very particularly pleased with this initiative. It's fantastic. And some of the key issues that come to the fore for me are the issue of dissemination. How many of the people who are in this domain are aware of this initiative? So the issue of dissemination for me is very critical. We need to have that information, and then that will inform our decision making when it comes to access to some of these great initiatives that is happening at Cambridge University. And then, of course, the element of collaboration. When it comes to open access, collaboration is intrinsic to the success of open access. So that is also very fantastic. And then the value systems that is driving this initiative, which means that increasingly we are moving towards an era where we see the need for open access to be dominant over the traditional subscription way of going about publishing. But then the digital divide also comes in. Those of us who are in developing countries, what does it mean for us when it comes to accessing some of these fantastic materials that are there? And this, for me, is pertinent. Whether you are a digital immigrant or a digital native, it affects you because you need that information, the dissemination, to be able to access this on time. And we never knew this until, of course, I never knew this until now. So the issue of dissemination is very critical. It should reach a wide audience so that the patronage will be very high. But even before I move on, I think, Hadi, you were asking the question about the process behind deciding what publications are open access or not.
Yes.
And I think I needed to speak to it as an author, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, so besides the funders requirement, there are four main factors to consider when we make this decision. The first is visibility. The next is cost, prestige, and speed. So in terms of visibility, we know that publishing an article open access means that more people are likely to see it, simply because more people will be able to access or download it. And of course, although it is still uncertain whether this increase in downloads and visitors translate into an increased citation rate, the greater visibility achieved with open access may allow you to reach potential collaborators more easily. So visibility is of the essence for us. The next, as I said, is cost. And I believe that the issue of cost is ubiquitous. In some cases, when authors genuinely do not have the means to pay publication fees, they can apply for full or partial waivers, depending on their financial capability and geographical location. So cost is also a core element of the things that we consider. Then we also consider prestige. There's a widespread and lingering notion that open access journals may not be of the highest quality due to their relatively quick turnaround time. Owing to this, some researchers are more reticent to publish in open access journals because they may not be as well known as some of the larger, more established journals in a given field. So prestige is also one of the issues we consider when we are deciding whether this should be open access or not. And then, of course, speed. In the 21st century, speed is of the essence when it comes to access to the latest knowledge. Traditional subscription journals struggle to meet this imperative. In particular, the traditional method or paper publication creates significant delays due to the need to bundle articles into issues, backlogs of publishable articles due to space limitations, the time required to print physical copies of the journal and distribute them. So all of these influence whether we'll go open access or subscription. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick, for explaining that so well, and especially from the author's perspective. Andri, coming back to what we have going on in Cambridge, we have Flip It Open, Read and Publish, and various other models. What can we expect next for open access in Cambridge?
I think more open access, hopefully. I think it's definitely a focus point for us across both books and journals. And yeah, on the journal side, it's a quicker transition to open access publishing. We have new initiatives coming in on the journal side as well. And on the book side, more experimentation with different models. So I think that's definitely what we can expect. Yeah.
Thank you. And Frederick, would you like to add anything to that? What is next for open research in your eyes?
Yeah, thank you so much. I believe that the future of open access is inextricably linked to the evolution of open science in general. This is because open access is just one of the 9 arms of open science taxonomy. So the others are open data, open reproducible research, open science evaluation, open science guidelines, open science policies, open science projects, and open science tools. I anticipate that the evolution of open science or open access in terms of open access routes, open access definitions, open access initiatives, as well as open access use and reuse are things that will be evolving in the future.
Thank you. Thank you both for your great insights and just a really, really great discussion. I think what I'm taking away from this today, just hearing you both talk about visibility, disseminating research quickly, removing that cost and geographical barrier, producing research that works for everyone and is available to as many people as possible. And then, of course, the collaboration, which, you both mentioned, and kind of it seems like it's this project where the authors, the readers, the libraries, everyone's on board and working together. So we will now move to the final part of the discussion where we look at improving libraries around the world. Here, I will ask you both, if you could make one change within academic publishing, what would it be? Frederick, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you so much. If I had the power, I had a wand, I would change article processing charges, because I consider article processing charges, of course, they are overheads which must be paid for. I agree, it's very, very important. But I believe that access, article processing charges, is one of the major barriers of open access in general, and especially for young academics. And as I said earlier, I don't know many, or if any, early career researchers in Ghana who are ready to spend 3 months' salary to publish one research article. It is more likely that they will use their money to cover or complete any kind of project that they are doing or attend an international conference, as opposed to using that amount of money to publish a single paper. So we find that young academics find themselves compelled to publish in traditional subscription-based journals simply because they can't afford to put their work anywhere else, causing them to risk falling foul of open access mandates. We need to address this clear and present disadvantage.
Thank you. Thanks, Frederick. And Andri, what would you change with Frederick's magic wand?
I think my biggest thing I would love to change is to shift the academic publishing view from being very European and North American focused to being a much more global vision and view of research. I think for too long, the academic world has just been dominated by research from certain fields. And I myself come from South Africa originally, where I know that, it's so much harder to get research out there. So I completely agree with Frederick that one way to do that is through the charges. But I think we need to shift the academic publishing view and focus from being what we would traditionally say is the global north to being more global. That would be my biggest thing to change, and hopefully that would help change a lot of other things across academic publishing.
Thank you both. Thank you for your fantastic insights, for your time, your thoughts, and sharing your expertise with us. To everyone listening, what are your thoughts? What change would you like to make? We want to hear from you. Please join in the discussion by tweeting us using our podcast hashtag Libraries Around the World.
Yeah, it was great to add my voice to the important topic of open access publishing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Frederick, and thank you, Andri.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here, and so nice to meet you as well, Frederick.
It's a pleasure, Andri.
Thank you both. That's it for today's episode on Open Access Publishing. We hope you've learned something new and we've given you some food for thought. To find out more about our open access initiatives at Cambridge, including how we're expanding our range of open access books and journals, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Cambridge UP Live to keep up to date with all our episodes and everything to do with libraries. A huge thank you again to our very special guests, Professor Frederick and Andri Johnston.